pues aquí estamos con Doug, que ha diseñado amplificadores para John Mayer, David Grissom y actualmente Mark Tremonti. Y bueno, estamos aquí en el PRS Experience, que nos va a dedicar un tiempo con nosotros para un par de preguntas. Doug,
yes.
Thank you for your time. It's a pleasure to
Welcome.
have with us. When you design a new amp, what do you based on? You based on classic models, artists and amps, on a renew of new idea you already had in mind?
That's a big question. That's a big question. We have probably a couple of different ways we do it. If I'm working with an artist, a lot of times he will have a signature amplifier that he wants to improve on, that he's been real comfortable with. Guys like Derek Trucks, he had super reverbs that he's had since he was a teenager. John Mayer, we were lining it up with a steel string singer, and so we were A-Bing that to get that same character. Mark Tremonti, he actually we were basing his amp, the small amp that we're doing with Mark. We took an earlier amp that we had done, the Archon, real aggressive amp, and we basically took that as a platform, and we modified internally the way his ears wanted to hear things. He would say, "I like this tone at 2 o'clock, but I want that knob to be at 12 when that tone." So a lot of things like that were happening with him. Also, he had some amps that he plays, concerts with, that he wanted to shade some of the tone characteristics toward some of the amps that he has traditionally played in concert. As far as non-artist amps, of course, Paul Smith and I work together a lot, and he drives a lot of what we will do our next amp with, so we collaborate with that in that sense. Sometimes we enhance older models of our amps. Sometimes I will take inspiration from traditional amps in the past, and of course, the three mother tones of historical amps, in my opinion, are Fender, Marshall, and Vox. Okay, and a lot of things are variations on those amps. So one thing we don't want to do is to be redundant. In other words, we have a window of products that we provide, and we don't want we don't want three real heavy amps. They're just slightly variation. We're trying to appeal to more people, so we'll have some clean amps, single channel amps, dual channel amps, traditional sounding amps with the voicing of 60s amps and that type of thing. So it kind of varies and it's funny looking back, some of the things just kind of played off each other, and some of the amps that we produced were mistakes or things that we didn't, not mistakes necessarily, but things that we explored that we didn't even know would be valid until we said, "Oh man, this is great,"
like
A couple of examples. There's some versions of Sweet 16s. There's a Sweet 16 Plus. That was a joke I was playing on Paul. I took a Sweet 16, which is 16 watts, and I put enough junk in there to make it look like a Sweet 16, but it was 50 watts. and that turned into be a model. So those types of things happen. So it's some of it's happenstance, some of it's lucky mistakes or lucky things that we just run across, and other things are definitely pointed toward a need for, like, we didn't have a high gain amp, and we created the Archon amp to be the first thing that would meet that thing, and it's done real well. It was needed, yeah. So anyway, that's kind of how we do it when we start.
Cool.
Yeah.
When you tried for the first time an amp, what do you listen to?
Well, I listen, like if I have developed an amp and I turn it on for the first time. Okay, first thing I do is I'll take all the knobs and I'll go all the way around to see if there's any weirdness that happens. A lot of times you'll hit a magic setting where it starts squealing, and so You got to work all that kind of stuff out. Or sometimes, say the reverb, you'll turn the reverb in at 12 o'clock, it's quiet, and then you go to 0 and it starts humming, or you go to 10, it starts humming, so you got to figure that kind of thing out. And then basically I just try to set as many parameters as I can to try to find the little things in a certain setting that's going to be a mistake or a problem, you know. And a lot of times it's just a matter of moving wires to, like you'll hear some grit or hear some odd noises, and you wonder where it is, and basically you'll end up needing to shield the wire because they're talking to each other in there. And a lot of times we still use the old school technology of, you know, hand wiring these things, and a lot of times it's just a matter of pulling wires apart. We're doing more PC board construction these days with the lower cost amps, and those are set in their way, so there's not a lot of human messing with lead dress and that type of
May I
thing.
introduce one question?
Yes.
There's a lot of controversy or people talking about the hand wire thing, the PCB boards, and,
Yeah.
and what do you think of those? I mean, like,
I
to be
think-
consistent, you need to have like a board.
Right, for consistency's sake, a board. Now there's the general consensus is PC boards can be just as good as hand wired, but a lot of times PC board designers do them for cheap amps, so they do them cheaply and they don't spend the time to work out problems, so they get a bad rap because they are all of a sudden put in a lower category, and they're just not done well. And I have learned, you know, and I'm doing boards now, PC boards a lot more, and I've learned that there's things you can do and things you can't do, and obviously you spend hours and hours working things out. It's so much harder on a PC board because they're all fixed and everything. You got to spend another $750 to get another version of the board, and it might work or it might not, you know. So anyway, it's tougher on a PC board, but once you understand certain principles and guidelines and things, like the last couple of ones I've done have had no problems. And so it's not saying it's just when that big brown dog bites you once, you don't let it do you again, you know. And so anyway, I know what to keep off each other and how to route things better. And so, but anyway, when I'm working on amps, we just try to find basically, do the tone stacks work good? Do the bass cut all the way off? Does the mid range come up and make a difference? You know, some amps the tone controls don't make, but we like these things to really work. Does the presence knob really give you some sparkle on the top? You know, and those types of things. So that's what I look. Or you know, do things like, does a switch pop? Just little things from an amp designer. Does a switch pop?
Yeah.
If it pops, then I got to put a little resistor in there to keep the static from building up and keep it. So those types of things. And I guess the basic thing, the first thing when you turn it on, does it blow up or not? You know, that kind of thing. Have you got capacitors in backwards or whatever?
Yeah.
And that has been known to happen sometimes. So anyway,
Okay.
yeah.
Cool. You have a preference between being a head or a combo?
A head.
You prefer a head?
Yeah.
May I ask why?
Because I'm probably not a gigging musician. And here's the deal. Combos, if you can imagine taking anything in here, take that little tray of parts right there. If you took a vibrator and you stuck it on the bottom of it, you're going to get rattles, and that's basically what you're doing with a combo. So combos are, you never know what baffle board, grill cloth to staple on the is going to cause a rub, and it's going to cause, so it takes a lot longer to work out all the rattles and the shakes. And then who knows when if it comes over on a container, or if we're doing it here or whatever, that shipping is going to cause a screw to loosen, you know. Okay. And so just for example, our Sanzeras, when they get here in a container, we take them all apart. We tighten everything back up and we put them back together, because that keeps the rattles from really being evident, you know, and the shakes and things. So a head, no problem. You know, it's no, you know, it's just not an issue with the head as much. If you have something that's rattling, it's because it's about to fail, and so it's a little different with the head. So heads, yeah, from a designer standpoint.
Yeah.
And you take a head and you can plug it into 112, 412, 410, whatever. And you can really work it with different rooms and things. Yeah.
May I ask you another thing?
Yes.
Low wattage or
Right.
high wattage amplifiers?
Well,
Do you think
you
that
can
is-
still blow your ears out. Excuse me. You can still blow your ears out with a 5-watt amp.
I know. But the
To
one-
me, there was something I read on a post about an Archon 100 one time, and they were talking nicely about it. A lot of the forums we don't get along with a lot of the forums for some reason, but this guy mentioned, somebody was talking about, is an Archon, it's 100 watts, I can't bring that home. This guy said it is the best bedroom amp that he's ever had.
Sure.
Bedroom amp, 100-watt amp. Okay, so wattage, and if you have a good master volume on amp, and you have it voiced correctly, I think the wattage aspect of it, you can just choose the wattage based how it feels to you. When I first started getting into the Marshall thing, I had a friend that had a Marshall museum, and it was dedicated to Eddie Van Halen. And I would go in, and he would plug in, and I have never in my life gotten chill bumps like those plexis would have. Yeah. And he would not have a 50-watt Marshall in there because it just didn't feel right to him. It was all 100 watts. So a lot of times it's a feel thing at that point.
Okay.
Yep.
Okay, cool.
Mm-hmm.
The last question, when and how started everything?
Okay. Antonio Gaudí. I was trained and worked for 15 years as an architect in Dallas. I was an architect. I grew up with music in a music environment. My mom's a great singer and piano player, and my dad was a Baptist preacher. So guitars weren't allowed in the house. So all my buddies around me were learning how to play guitar, and I was going, I wish I could do that, but they only gave me piano lessons, and that was all cool, And so by the time I got my first guitar, I was into college. So, and by the end, I was in architecture school, and I couldn't really work. I loved it or whatever. And I started making friends with musicians that were really good, and they would drag me to go see these unknown, guitarists like Stevie Ray Vaughan and Eric Johnson. And nobody knew about them back then in the early 80s and 79. I mean, it's in Texas. And a little later from that, David Grissom, who's going to be playing tonight. And they were just monster players, and I love that scene so much, but I didn't really have what I considered giggable skills. I can play about 15 seconds just to test an amp, and then I don't care to play anymore. I'm just, okay, the amp sounds great, that's it. I can be legit for about 25 seconds, But all these guys were great. So to be able to get on the tour bus, I used my architectural skills and knowledge and stuff, and started just designing amps on paper, and basically just the cabinets. So I would go to pawn shops and I'd get old Alamo amps that were just torn to pieces, buy them for $10, and I would take the chassis out and I would build new cabinets around them, and I'd put the chassis back in, I'd cover them and all that kind of stuff. So I love the woodworking. That's the kind of design I used to do, millwork, and we were commercial, but I love the interior details and things. So I just translated that to music. I just married my two passions, and basically. So I finally, even though I really didn't consider myself a gigging guy, I finally became obsessed with old vintage amps. So I went in and I collected every blackface Fender combo, not heads, just combos, and a couple of Marshalls, and I had them as just a collection. And I would play, this sounds great. This one sounds really good, The best one of the whole bunch was a non-reverb deluxe. It was awesome. And everything that I designed subsequent, I could put it through that cabinet. It was it was an Oxford speaker. Anyway, it's killer. And I had some museum pieces too. I had some things that looked like they came out of the factory. But all those things, you know, I really, but then I traded a hunting rifle for a 1954 Tweed Fender Pro.
Oh my God.
54 Pro. 15-inch speaker, cathode biased, old beat up thing. And I bought it from a guy that worked at Texas Instruments. You know, a guy that designed PC boards for him, actually. And these guys, I got to know the Texas Instruments people subsequently, all the engineers or whatever. But anyway, this guy brought this amp in, and I plugged it in, and I played it for about 10 seconds, and I said, I understand what they're talking about with these things now. It was awesome. I mean, you know, chill bump inspiring, and then it smoked because it hadn't been turned on in 20 years. It had been in a guy's closet. And so the engineers at TI, they helped me, you know, open the back up, and they helped me change the caps out that had blown up because they were all dried up. And I got to looking at that circuit, and I said, okay, this circuit is super simple, and it sounded awesome. I said, what's wrong with this picture? So I started researching Fender Pro amps, and I started like taking parts of a 57 Pro and a 54 Pro and putting them all together. And my high school mascot was the Wampus Cats, which no other team in Texas has. And I called them the Wampus Cat amps. And I would take them around to stores, and people were putting them against Mesa Boogies, and they were putting against all these amps, and I said, this sounds better, man. I mean, you know, and anyway, they lured me into this dark world of amplifier design with too much initial praise and, you know, and I didn't know what I was doing, you know, and I'd made all the wrong mistakes at the right time, and those mistakes were happy mistakes, and they all made it sound unique and good, and all the blues guys, you know, these Wampus Cat amps or whatever. So I became obsessed with the whole electronics thing because I had been trained as an architect, didn't know anything about electronics. So you see all my books there, I brought them with me. All these old TI guys would turn their books into half-price books, all these tube amp stuff, and it was right down the road from me, and I would buy all these books, and I had all these engineers that were helping me. And then I had, you know, musicians starting to help me with the tone. So it was a collaborative effort with all these people in Dallas just pouring their information into me and helping me. And I was able to put it together because I'm an architect. That's what I do. I put together stuff. I put together buildings through all this information. I would do it. So it basically ended up where I had a little bit of success to the point where I was building amps constantly. I got a couple on TV at Austin City Limits with some guys. Down in Austin, a lot of country guys were into them, you know, and it became the thing, you know, Sewell amps, Wampus Cats, and Texaverbs and Texaplexes and all that stuff. And then I got talked into showing my amps at a trade show, the Dallas Vintage Guitar Show, and 2 booths down was Paul Reed Smith. And the rest is history. Paul came down, he didn't have any amps to play at his concert. And we struck up a great friendship, and over a period of a couple of years working on them together, he bought everything I had for sale in there, which most of them were already sold, but he bought what I had that wasn't for sale. And then we'd get on the phone, and he'd say, Doug, what's this purple wire? And I don't know what you're looking at. It was before FaceTime, you know. I don't know what purple wire you're talking about. But anyway, I'd have sweat dripping off my nose because Paul was asking me all these questions. You know how he is, you know. So anyway, we went through a great, you know, period where we were just friends. And then he called me one day. He sounded very somber, and I was going, oh, what's wrong? You know, he goes, I've been authorized to ask you, you know, through the board if you would come head up the amp department. And I'm like, I just started laughing, you know. I said, head up, you know, change careers, you know, age 50. And he kept on, and doggone it, I shut my architectural firm down and moved my family from Texas out here. 10 years ago tomorrow. Yeah, tomorrow's my 10th year here.
I've seen that.
So yeah,
It's a great story, man.
yeah, it's fantastic, and I feel like I'm kind of cheating, you know, because it's so much fun, And that whole architecture thing was quite a burden because the regulations and the potential upside. It was very, to see a building come up, it's really hard. And basically now I've taken that building and I've gone down and I'm doing drawings. I'm doing more drawing now than I did as an architect, but all the drawing and design that you do just to come up with a new amp, it's keeping me sharp as far as my design skill. And it's cool to see people out there and see them on TV and work with David Grissom and work with the Allman Brothers, the Doobie Brothers, John Mayer, on and on and on. It's all, and Paul, a legend, Paul Smith, every day. Yeah, it's good stuff.
So can we listen just briefly to that?
I'll hit a couple of chords. Anybody in here, of the five guys in here, I'm the worst player. I guarantee you. I don't even know you guys. Yeah. But it's what is it? It's Tremonti, Mark Tremonti. It's 15 watts, but it's super loud. It's got a half power switch on back. It is basically what I call an adult lunchbox amp. Okay. It's got 6 preamp tubes. No, this 1 and 2 preamp tubes. It's got 6L6 power tubes. We just basically detune this thing down to 15 watts, and it's got 2 channels. It's got flash and trash. Look at that.
Oh, cool.
Isn't that cool? Yeah. And at night, man, it's blowing right through these things all the way to the ceiling. And so it's cleans. He apparently did his last album using a lot of this. Yeah. And he stated that. I'm not sure to what extent, but he from what I was hearing, most of it. But he's twin reverbs is what, and he loves this clean.
Oh, that clean is
yeah,
it's amazing.
Yeah. The lead obviously is super heavy. It does clean up. Goes far, and that is just barely cracked. That's barely cracked. So it's
how do you make 15 125 be that powerful?
Low plate voltage. 15 watts with these power tubes, low plate voltage.
Okay.
Yeah, it's like these amps that have power scaling.
Yeah.
Where you can turns the plate voltage down, and you can go down to 1 watt. Well, we basically power scale this down just to one setting at 15. It's a little more. It's like 16 when the final transformers got wound and came in. It's a little more than 15. But
sounds loud. It's amazing.
What's 1 watt among friends? That kind of a deal. Anyway, so yeah, and it's a great value. What are they running? Retail?
I think they are around in Europe. They are around 500, something like that.
500.
Yeah. It's I guarantee you can gig with this in a small gig. I guarantee you how loud it is.
Even in a big stage,
Right.
if you put a couple of those
Right.
with 2 speakers, you are ready.
Absolutely. Of course, I'm doing through a market, but it's half power switch. It's got different outputs. It's got a foot switch to go from clean and dirty, and a loop, a set loop, and the loop works great. Cool. And it's a tube loop. So, yep. Turn this. Cool. Hit the master. But yeah, we think it's going to do. And it's heavy steel construction. It's kind of a little chunk.
I told you it's selling well. We haven't received those in Europe yet, but those,
Yeah, they're.
big interest.
Excited about those. Excited.
Okay, so.
All right. Are we good?
Doug,
All right.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you for
Awesome,
doing this,
man. Awesome.